Carl Sagan muttered something to his wife in December 1996, and she vowed never to say it again. His greatest fear was not that he was dying of a rare blood illness. For the past 30 years, Ann Druyan has kept that a secret. She's exposing the most adored scientist in America's secret life. The true reasons Harvard rejected him were his marijuana addiction, the FBI files, and the affairs that ruined his family. We learned to wonder about the universe from Carl Sagan. But his wife is aware that he was constantly afraid. His legacy will be permanently destroyed by what she is now acknowledging. On November 9, 1934, Carl Sagan was born in Bensonhurst, a low-income area of Brooklyn. His parents were Jewish immigrants from Ukraine who were attempting to make it through the Great Depression. Samuel, his father, used to be a tailor but now works wherever he can to support the family. Rachel, his mother, remained at home and was very saddened that Carl was named after her mother, who passed away during childbirth. She never truly got over that pain. They practiced Reform Judaism, which was more tolerant than traditional Judaism, and lived in a modest apartment. When Carl was 4 years old, everything changed. He went to the New York World's Fair in 1939. Air conditioners, enormous robots, a talking machine, and a television were among the unreal objects he observed. He witnessed the burial of a time capsule. Something about that moment gave him the impression that the future was just waiting to be touched, even though he didn't completely comprehend it at the time. He later claimed that the fair depicted a clean, promising, and impoverishment-free world, and he absorbed it all like a dream he would never forget. He asked his family a question at the age of 5 that they were unable to respond to. He was curious as to what stars were. His mother gave him a library card and gave him permission to visit the local library alone. The librarian gave him a book about Hollywood stars when he requested for one about stars, by accident. However, she gave him a children's book that transformed his life once they determined what he truly desired. He learned from that book that the sun was a star and that the stars were merely very distant suns. He had chills at that moment. He claimed that it was almost religious, as if he had suddenly realized the size of the cosmos. It had a lasting impression on him. Later, his family relocated to New Jersey. Carl attended Roué High School as well. He was only 16 when he graduated in 1951. Despite his intelligence, he frequently felt out of place. He penned the school paper, Space-Time and the Poet. Even in the presence of other students, he felt alienated, even after joining the chemistry club and the National Honor Society. He was constantly thinking about the stars. He once aloud suggested that Jesus Christ might have been an alien during a formal dinner. Although adults were taken aback, Carl wasn't attempting to be impolite. He simply had a different way of thinking. Teachers encouraged him to pursue his goals after noticing his talent. Carl enrolled on a full scholarship at the University of Chicago that fall of 1951. He was only 16 at the time. In a unique program, science students at the institution also studied philosophy, literature, and the arts. While studying physics, he read Freud and Shakespeare. He received instruction from Nobel laureates Harold Urey and H.J. Mueller. He joined in-depth conversations on the planet's origins and rose to the position of president of the Astronomy Club. He even saw the well-known Miller-Urey experiment, which demonstrated how simple chemicals may give rise to life. Carl made notes that included science fiction, astronomy, genetics, music, and psychology. Piece by piece, he was creating his own world in his mind. However, a dangerous event occurred in 1958. Now a PhD student, Carl became involved with Project A119, a covert government initiative. To demonstrate their might to the world, the U.S. military intended to detonate a nuclear weapon on the moon. Carl was only 24, but was cleared as top secret. He made a mistake in 1959. In an application for a scholarship, he submitted the titles of classified papers. For decades, no one took attention. However, Carl's violation of the guidelines was confirmed by the project manager in 1999. Nevertheless, it demonstrated Carl's willingness to take chances, even if doing so meant defying the rules. Carl obtained his doctorate in astronomy and astrophysics by 1960. He looked toward Venus. Scientists believed that Venus might be a tropical planet that supported life at the time. However, Carl discovered something startling after running computer models. Venus, according to him, is a scorching desert with temperatures close to 800 degrees Fahrenheit. The majority didn't trust him, but NASA Mariner 2 demonstrated his correctness in 1962. People began to take him seriously after he was the first to foresee the truth. Carl backed Project Ozma, the first legitimate scientific quest for extraterrestrial life, in the same year. He assisted in using a massive radio telescope in West Virginia to search for signals from space. In the hopes of discovering something from distant worlds, they listened for months. Excited, Carl informed the people that aliens were most likely real. He was ridiculed by many scientists who claimed it wasn't true science. Carl persisted, however, claiming that the arithmetic demonstrated this: life must have existed outside. Carl enrolled at Harvard in 1963. He contributed to NASA Mars missions and helped demonstrate the planet's extremely thin atmosphere. However, he wasn't liked by everyone. He and Gerard Kuiper, another renowned astronomer, got into a heated disagreement on who should be given credit for specific discoveries. Carl's chances were hampered by that fight, and to everyone's surprise, Harvard denied him tenure in 1968. They claimed he lacked focus and was too general. He was accused of stealing credit by some. He simply enjoyed the limelight too much, others whispered. Harvard pushed him away for whatever reason. However, in 1969, Cornell University recognized his talent and hired him, allowing him to be himself without restriction. Carl and Iosif Shklovsky, a Soviet scientist, collaborated on the book Intelligent Life in the Universe in 1966. During the Cold War, they corresponded by mail over the Iron Curtain. According to the book, our galaxy may harbor 1 million extraterrestrial civilizations. It was audacious and frightening. It was described as a delight to read by Isaac Asimov, one of the most significant novels ever written, according to another Nobel laureate. Carl played a key role in bringing about the realization that we are not alone at last. He contributed to the design of the Mariner 9 mission to Mars in 1971. It orbited another planet for the first time. However, everything was shrouded by a huge dust storm when it got there. It appeared to be a catastrophe at first. However, that storm demonstrated that Mars was still alive. Change was alive in it. A few weeks prior to launch, one of the 2 spacecraft that had begun the journey crashed into the Atlantic. The entire idea had to be modified by Carl's staff. They succeeded, and the dust storm provided them with more information than they could have ever imagined. Viking missions followed. Carl was involved in the planning of the first landers to set foot on Mars in 1975. Vikings 1 and 2 began excavating the Martian soil by the summer of 1976. Although there was no conclusive evidence of life found in the tests, the results were odd enough to keep people debating. Carl wanted to think. Bruce Murray of NASA disagreed with him, claiming that they were exaggerating their expectations. Carl, however, thought that wonder was significant. The enigma persisted despite the frigid temperatures and the red and dry dirt. Carl produced something that caused discomfort in 1972. Along with Pioneers 10 and 11, he contributed to the design of a plaque that was launched into space. It featured a nude couple. Just a basic illustration for extraterrestrials. However, certain factions were incensed. They referred to it as vulgar. NASA made the decision to exclude nudity from upcoming flights. Carl claimed that he purposefully made the drawing simplistic, concerned that anything too complicated would not be approved. The plaque, however, was still in the past. It was humanity's first communication with the stars. He oversaw the Voyager Golden Record, an even larger endeavor, in 1977. Carl and his crew spent just 6 weeks and $1,500 creating a record that included Earth-based photographs, music, and multilingual greetings. He even featured Johnny B. Goodbye, Chuck Berry, which some people thought was questionable. Carl, however, thought that this was a gift from Earth, a message that demonstrated not only our scientific understanding, but also our emotional intelligence. For billions of years, Voyager 1 will float through space. It might come close to another star in 40,000 years. Anyone who discovers it will know that someone tried to say hello when they lived here. Under the alias Mr. X, Carl Sagan authored a covert essay about marijuana in 1969 when he was just 35 years old. He discussed how it altered his perspective on music, art, and even science. He claimed it helped him notice things others missed and experience things more intensely. It was a dangerous step. The war on drugs was raging in the United States. He might have lost his job, his reputation, and his connections at NASA if anyone had discovered. Nevertheless, he wrote it, thinking it was important. Only after his death in 1996 did his biographer ultimately disclose that the essay was, in fact, written by Sagan. Sagan married Linda Salzman in 1968, a year prior to the essay. She was imaginative, creative, and free-spirited. It appeared to be a good fit at first. Although they produced a son named Nick, their marriage was failing by the late 1970s. Sagan's attention was solely on his task. She should take care of the house while he concentrated on research, he thought. For him, she sacrificed her own career, but their marriage cooled down. He had affairs with other women, some of whom were co-workers, and was constantly away. Similar to his first marriage, it ended in divorce by 1981. Despite his brilliance, he had severe personal struggles. Sagan also got more vocal in the 1970s. He was doing more than science. He began to voice his opposition to the use of chemical weapons like Agent Orange, environmental damage, and the Vietnam War. The FBI took note. They kept a careful eye on him. He became a target because he didn't hesitate to voice his opinions, even if doing so put his career or the government in jeopardy. He was either viewed as threatening or as someone who was greatly admired. However, he never gave up. When he debuted his television program, Cosmos, A Personal Journey, in 1980, everything changed. It was unlike any previous science show. Speaking in a gentle, poetic voice, he stood before galaxies and stars, educating common people about the cosmos. 500 million people worldwide watched the show. It was created with an unprecedented $8 million for a science course at the time. It brought Carl Sagan international recognition, inspired millions, and won honors. Although he was revered among scientists, some also felt that he was becoming overly famous. He began issuing nuclear war warnings to the public that same year. He contributed to the writing of the T-TAPS report by 1983. It demonstrated that enough dust might be released into the sky to cover the sun in even a little nuclear conflict. Crops would die, the ground would freeze, and billions of people may go hungry. It was dubbed Nuclear Winter. He even used a model Earth to help Congress grasp what would happen. He was referred to as dramatic by some. Some referred to him as a hero. The Pope himself wanted to know more. Gorbachev informed President Reagan in 1988 that Sagan's cautions had influenced his decision to abandon nuclear weapons. Sagan's work, however, was dangerous. People who thought he was harming the nation threatened to kill him. Despite the fact that he was merely attempting to save lives, they perceived his warnings as un-American. Sagan encountered yet another obstacle in 1982. The funding for SETI, the organization that looked for extraterrestrial life, was recently slashed by Congress. It was derided as a waste of money by Senator William Proxmire. Sagan carefully explained the Drake equation live in front of them, outlining the possibility of extraterrestrial life and the need to continue searching. They were won over by him. The funding returned by the end of that year. When did he win a debate? But he also had a change of heart. He wrote a book about faith and aliens called Contact in 1985. The narrative implied that our religious convictions may be called into question if we discovered life beyond. Christian leaders were incensed. They said that he was poisoning young minds and assaulting religion. Despite the strong criticism, the book went on to become a bestseller. Sagan intended people to think, and it did just that. However, amongst all of this turmoil, a lovely thing occurred. While working on the Voyager expedition in 1977, Sagan had a conversation with Ann Druyan, a writer. She had discovered an ancient Chinese song for the golden record of the spacecraft, which was intended to teach aliens about Earth. Within an hour of her calling him to tell him the news, their conversation evolved into something more. Over the phone, they fell in love. They were involved 2 days after Voyager 1 launched. Later, while Ann was contemplating love, her brainwaves were captured. As a testament to her love for Carl, those signals are now permanently traveling through space. It's not merely science, it's poetic. He persisted in pushing limits. He had a disagreement with another scientific titan, Stephen Jay Gould, in 1987. According to Gould, evolution occurred gradually. Sagan thought it might occur quickly, particularly on other worlds. Their argument was not merely scholarly. It has to do with our perception of life in the cosmos. Both have strong opinions and were unwilling to compromise. Sagan requested that NASA reorient Voyager 1 toward Earth in 1990. It captured a picture from a distance of 6 billion kilometers. Earth was but a speck in a sunbeam, a tiny dot. It was dubbed the pale blue dot by him. His remarks about our frailty and smallness profoundly affected individuals. It was despised by several scientists. Some thought it permanently altered our self-perception, while others argued he was being overly sentimental. In 1994, 2 years prior to his passing, Sagan once more disclosed his marijuana use in his book Pale Blue Dot. He related it to the universe's wonder. It was audacious. He didn't care that the war on drugs was still going on. He wished to be truthful. He released The Demon-Haunted World in the same year. He cautioned that Americans were becoming duped by conspiracy theories, UFOs, phony science, and false ideas. People were astonished by the polling statistics he displayed. Millions thought that aliens had kidnapped them. This wasn't science, according to Sagan. It was illusion and terror taking control. He pleaded with everyone to ask questions and think clearly, to make use of proof. He also earned the Pulitzer Prize for his 1977 book, The Dragons of Eden, which made the argument that our apprehension of creatures like dragons may stem from our ancestors' memory of predators. It was peculiar yet potent. In 1979, he once more targeted Immanuel Velikovsky and other individuals who made outrageous statements in an attempt to discredit bogus science and broke his mind. Even incorrect beliefs should be carefully examined, he urged, but not simply with faith, but with actual science. The book Cosmos was then released in 1980 simultaneously with the television program. More than 5 million copies were sold. Readers were surprised by one passage. Giordano Bruno, who was burnt alive in 1600 for claiming that the stars were planets, was the subject of the story. Bruno's lips was clamped shut, as Sagan said. So he was unable to talk before being burned. They dumped his ashes into the river. Sagan used that to illustrate the repeated attempts by religion to stifle science. Sagan received one of his biggest validations in the early 1990s thanks to fresh findings from the Galileo mission to Jupiter. The probe discovered evidence of a vast ocean beneath Europa's ice between 1989 and 1995. It has the capacity to contain more water than all of the oceans on Earth. This proved to Sagan that there might be life out there. His conviction that there were countless possibilities in the universe no longer seemed so absurd. In 1957, Carl Sagan got married for the first time. When he married Lynn Margulies, a well-known biologist, he was still a young student at the University of Chicago. Wayne, Dorian, and Jeremy were their 2 sons. The future appeared bright at first, but nobody realized how much darker things were within the house. Later, Lynn claimed that Carl could be aggressive and that, while attempting to establish her own job, she had to manage practically everything at home. She once referred to their marriage as a child-shared torture chamber. By 1964, it had all ended in divorce. Years later, Carl's biographer claimed that the marriage was ruined by his incessant demand for attention and his fixation with science. He neglected the harm it was causing to his family because he was so preoccupied with his profession. Once more, this pattern would recur. Carl remarried in 1968. It was to Linda Salzman, an artist, this time. She assisted him in becoming more emotionally open in the late 1960s and early 1970s. In addition, Linda created the well-known paintings of naked people that were sent aboard the Pioneer 1 spacecraft. However, their home life began to disintegrate behind the scenes. Carl didn't take her work seriously and didn't assist her much with tasks. People close to them said that he expected Linda to take care of the cooking and cleaning so he could concentrate on his studies. In 1981, things deteriorated much further. Carl began working on the Voyager Golden Record project at that point. During that period, he met Ann Druyan. They immediately fell in love. Carl and Linda got divorced the same year. It was described as unpleasant and bitter. Nick Sagan, the only child Carl and Linda had together, has remarked that having a father who was both well-known and frequently absent was difficult. The beginning of Carl and Ann's romance was peculiar. They were both at a party in Manhattan one evening in 1977. Ann was engaged to someone else, and Carl was still wed to Linda. However, everything changed that summer while working on the Voyager project. One day, Ann wanted to put a lovely 2,500-year-old Chinese song on the record. She informed Carl about it over the phone. They were engaged by the time they hung up. Later, Ann claimed that it made her want to scream with delight and felt like a scientific discovery. They declared their engagement on August 20th, 1977, just 2 days after the first Voyager spacecraft launched. Sasha and Samuel are their 2 children from their 1981 marriage. Carl and Ann were together until the very end, despite rumors about how it started. Together, they wrote books and rose to prominence as one of science's most famous couples. However, despite inspiring millions, Carl frequently had difficulties as a father. He had 5 children from his 3 marriages, and he was more absent than present for a large number of them. For extended periods, he was separated from 3 of his 5 children. At times, Ann had to remind him to call or consider his eldest sons. Carl's celebrity caused issues among the family. His children struggled to establish themselves in the world. They had been forced to live in his shadow. Carl seems to be a pleasant, compassionate instructor on television. He didn't assist with anything at home, though. He was not a cook. He didn't do any cleaning. Being his child was both challenging and incredible, according to his son Nick. He referred to his father as his greatest instructor. Pend is his greatest instructor. However, he also witnessed the extent to which Carl's job separated him from his family. In 1994, everything was different. Carl was diagnosed with myelodysplasia, a rare and dangerous condition, that year. He was 60 years old. His bone marrow was harmed by the illness, and he wouldn't have much longer to live without assistance. Carl received a donation from his sister. He underwent extensive chemotherapy and 3 bone marrow transplants. Twice, he nearly died. He continued to do studies and give talks even during this period. He claimed that he would have perished sooner if it weren't for science. However, the therapies extended his life. The final chapter of his last book, Billions and Billions, was written in 1996. Only a few months before his death, it was completed. The book issued a warning about climate change and the harm that humans were causing to the environment. Carl said in one passage that he had faced death 6 times, and it had turned away 6 of those times. But he was certain that it would not turn away permanently. According to him, death would strike him in the same way that it does for everyone else. After his death, Ann added an epilogue. She told of their last moments together. Family members gathered. Carl's final words were just goodbye, Ann. At the age of 62, he passed away on December 20th, 1996. Pneumonia following his last transplant was the culprit. In Seattle, he died at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. Later, Ann revealed something that startled a lot of people. Carl never resorted to religion, not even in his latter days. To the very end, he adhered to his scientific convictions. Lakeview Cemetery in Ithaca, New York, is where he was laid to rest. Ann, his sister, 5 kids, and a grandson were all left behind. Ann carried on Carl's efforts after his passing. She contributed to the development of new Cosmos versions between 2014 and 2020. A completely new generation was reached by these shows. The fact that Carl's earlier warnings were now coming to pass astounded a lot of people. His theories about runaway greenhouse effects and nuclear winter were no longer just theories. Carl has researched how Venus got so hot in the 1970s. He realized that Earth might be in peril as a result of that endeavor. He later issued a warning that, by obstructing sunlight, nuclear war might result in global cooling. Decades later, Ann claimed that the same science that underlies nuclear winter was also contributing to the explanation of the acceleration of global climate change. It demonstrated how, in the 2020s, Carl's 1980s warnings were still relevant threats. Carl continued to speak out even in his last years. He cautioned people against disregarding science. He sat down with Charlie Rose for his final significant interview in May 1996. Carl appeared to be very frail. However, his remarks were incisive. He claimed that although America had created a world of science and technology, the majority of people were ignorant of both. That was risky, he said. He cautioned that this combination of ignorance and power will eventually blow up in our faces. He also questioned how we can govern a scientifically based democracy when the majority of people are ignorant of it. More surprises surfaced years later. People learned in 2010 that Carl Sagan was the subject of an FBI file. It revealed that the government had been keeping an eye on him for years. The FBI believed it might be a danger when he received an odd letter in 1983 from someone forecasting a space shuttle tragedy and World War III, but upon further investigation, they discovered the sender had been dead for 10 years. The fact that the shuttle catastrophe actually occurred in 2003 just made it more bizarre. Exactly as stated in the letter. During demonstrations against nuclear testing in the 1980s, Carl was also arrested twice. At the test location in Nevada, he scaled fences. He was working to prevent the production of more nuclear weapons. This demonstrated his seriousness even if it resulted in his arrest.